Remember this, reader. When the world was new, and no humans had yet laid claim to the land, there were giants. The weapons they used were huge and heavy, and one day, in the brutality of battle, a sword slipped from its owner's outstretched hand and was hurled spinning through the air and sank into the mud. Many years later, when men were the masters of the earth and giants were just stories, the long-lost weapon was found. After hundreds of years, it was hauled from the mud and made gleaming again. And as such prizes are precious and rare, it was relegated to a place of honor on a wall by the one who found it. Years passed, and our pleasant tale begins. King Hrothgar, to give a gift to his soldiers for their many daring deeds, caused to be built a marvelous mead hall, and within it Hrothgar's heroes had a perfect place to cavort and carry on, or sit at ease and savor their mead. But deep in the dark marsh near the mead hall lived the gruesome Grendel, a hideous thing that haunted the swamp and simmered, full of fury, at men in the mead hall, at their music and merrymaking. Wrapped in robes of darkest night, this devil-demon made for the mead hall, and when rollicking and revelry gave way to snores and slumber, the beastly thing burst through the door, grabbed up 30 of their number, and gobbling them greedily, departed the mead hall for the soggy swamp that spawned him. King Hrothgar sat speechless when he heard the horrible news. But the news kept coming. Weeks gave way to months, and months mounted to a year, and 1 year wove itself into 12, and still there was no stop to the slaughter. After a dozen dreadful years, the sad story was told to a lad who, though few in years, was fabled for his boldness and bravery, and his strength, his superhuman strength. He went by the name of Beowulf. Determined to do great deeds one day, Beowulf bid his companions accompany him on a short voyage of vengeance. From Geatland, in what's now known as Sweden, they sailed to Denmark, the land of the Danes. King Hrothgar, distraught from 12 years of tumult in his kingdom, clasped Beowulf to his bosom, so great was his gratitude. And then Beowulf lay down in the dim light of the mead hall, letting others lie quietly while his senses were alive for sounds of anything amiss that might come out of the mist. And surely, as winter brings howling winds, the descending darkness brought with it the bane of Hrothgar's hall, Grendel. He emerged from the muck of the swamp, and like sudden thunder shattered the doors of the mead hall. But this time, a heaven-strong hand lashed out like lightning and gripped him with such force he felt a sudden shiver. Their fight was fearsome. Soldiers scattered to the surrounding walls as the two tumbled into tables and battered benches into splinters with the savage brutality of their battle. Refusing to release his initial grip, Beowulf bore down on Grendel's shoulder and shook it, until with a wet and wrenching crack of breaking bone the shoulder separated from Grendel, who staggered toward the swamp, precious blood pouring from the place where his shoulder had separated from the socket. With daylight, the darkness lifted not only of night, but of the grey grimness that had lay over Hrothgar's hall for an age. The king sank down and sobbed with relief, and all of them there rejoiced when Beowulf hoisted high the monster's dismembered arm and nailed it over noble Hrothgar's throne, and gave thanks. Then, after another day during which Beowulf and his friends found themselves made much over, Hrothgar's subjects lay down to sleep, and sleep soundly for the first time in what seemed forever. But out of the mist, more misery made its way to the mead hall. Grendel's mother, hell-bent on avenging the butchering of her beloved son by the hand of some human, approached the place. As had her son before, she smashed the doors with such force they flew from their hinges. Reaching out, she seized a single warrior and slew him. With the warrior over her shoulder, she snatched her son's severed arm from where it was hung on Hrothgar's hall, and fled back to the bog. Morning came, and Hrothgar mourned. Beowulf called his companions to him. They tracked the trail of gore through the gray sawgrass until they came to a cliff where, looking down, they saw a lake. And there, at that spot, lay the severed head of the soldier this malevolent mother had murdered, a jeering invitation to join her and follow further. And the soldiers stepped back. But not Beowulf. He leapt into the lake to seek the she-beast whose bloody path plunged into the lake itself. Down and down dived Beowulf, gripping his sword in the gloom, when suddenly he was slammed and shaken. Wary and watchful, Grendel's mother had lain in wait, lurking beneath the surface of the lake to punish the puny humans who had slain her son. She smashed and smote, but so well armed and armored was Beowulf that though she had him in her clutches, she could not cut through. So she dragged his near-drowned form down, and then up into a cavern that lay under the lake. There she dragged him into dank air that hung heavily with the odor of decay, and he saw the slumping shape of Grendel, who had died there days before. Beowulf brought his sword brutally around to sink it into her scabby flesh, but her flesh was forged in the fires of hell, and the blade, unable to bite, bounced off. So Beowulf slung it aside and gripped her with his great arms. But Beowulf was borne down by her savage onslaught, and as she weighed him down, she brought around her own blade and brought it down with full force. But the monster had not removed the man's mail shirt, which absorbed the blow and gave the great hero a brief reprieve. He reached for anything that might make for a moment's advantage, and his hand fell upon the hilt of a weapon that hung on a wall. It was a weapon from when giants owned the earth, pulled from the mud of the marsh and polished by Grendel's mother till it gleamed. He lifted the large weapon from the brackets that bore it, and brought the thing down with sudden swiftness upon the figure poised over him, her own point above his heart. Huge and heavy, it thunked deep into the throat of the she-beast, whose shrill shriek echoed off the cave walls. And as her blood billowed over the blade, the hideous hag shuddered, sagged sideways, and fell to the floor. So filled with fulminating fury was the beast's blood, which now bathed the blade, it began to bubble and melt away the metal. Beowulf used it, before the blade burned away, to hack off the head of Grendel's corpse. Then, carrying the horrible head, and also the hilt of the sword, he dove again into the dark water and swam to the surface. Many men waiting at the edge of the lake had left, having lost hope. So when Beowulf breached the surface, they broke into shouts of joy and jubilation. As proof he'd kept his promise to Hrothgar, he hauled up with one hand the head of Grendel, and with the other hand the hilt of a huge sword. They made their way back to the mead hall. A gift was made of Grendel's head to Hrothgar, and also the hilt of the blade with which Beowulf had removed it. Rewards of riches were given, 12 treasures, with which Beowulf and his band could sail home to live lives of luxury. King Hrothgar wrapped Beowulf in an embrace, wept, and waved goodbye as Beowulf walked aboard the boat that would bear him home. And Beowulf, now unrivaled in reputation, and a hero whose deeds would endure as long as songs were sung and tales were told, sailed back to Sweden.